It is really easy for a lot of people to see anxiety as part of their identity, especially if it's coming with a formal diagnosis. But anxiety and really any other mental health challenge is just the body's way of telling us that there is a physical health need that has to be addressed. So in this video, we'll be talking about the top 5 physical causes of anxiety that are very much within your control. And when you address them, you will go a long way to healing your anxiety and experiencing lasting calm. I'm Karina, and welcome to my channel where we discuss practical ways to elevate our wellness from a mind, body, soul perspective. The first thing that you want to look at if you are experiencing anxiety is your caffeine intake. If you're drinking coffee, think about swapping that for a lower caffeine alternative like cacao or an herbal tea that's totally free of caffeine. You could also try a decaf coffee, but make sure that it's coming from a company that is using clean caffeine removal processes, meaning free of chemicals. I can't tell you how many people I know who say that they have anxiety like it's just who they are and there's nothing they can do about it when they're drinking 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day. And there's a very real biochemical reason for why caffeine can contribute to anxiety. Caffeine inhibits our adenosine receptors. There's a lot of these receptors located within our central nervous system, and they're responsible for modulating key neurotransmitters like dopamine, acetylcholine, GABA, serotonin. All of these are responsible for regulating our sleep and our mood and calming us down when it's time to get ready for bed. So caffeine is inhibiting these adenosine receptors to make you feel more alert, more productive, have more energy, but then it's more difficult to calm yourself back down. I remember the few times in my life when I drank coffee on a regular basis to keep up with a super busy lifestyle, and it wasn't a whole lot, just a cup a day each morning. But I remember at the peak of this when I was in grad school, and it just felt so impossible to keep up with all the workload without coffee. I would feel super jittery all the time. I would feel super on edge. And I remember one month, my period came twice in that month with a span of 2 weeks in between. And that never happens with me. My cycle is usually very regular, 26 to 28 days in length. So when that happened, I decided never again was I going to drink coffee. Now, my response to caffeine was quite significant, but caffeine is not going to affect all people equally because of a couple of gene variants. The first one is CYP1A2, and that determines how fast your liver metabolizes caffeine and takes it out of the bloodstream. And the second gene variant is associated with ADORA2A, and that determines how your brain and your neurotransmitters are affected by the caffeine inhibiting those adenosine receptors. There's a lot of really interesting research linking neurological conditions to caffeine intake. There was one notable study that showed a link between caffeine intake and people with gene variants in CYP1A2 and Parkinson's disease, because Parkinson's disease is associated with a loss of dopamine. And if caffeine is inhibiting the adenosine receptors that modulate dopamine, then that's going to play a role. So you could get some genetic testing done and see how you are with these gene variants, but chances are if you're experiencing anxiety and you're taking in a moderate to high amount of caffeine, then your body is probably not tolerating that very well. And I know that there are some coffee companies that are blending in adaptogens and electrolytes. And I haven't personally tried any of these, so I can't speak to how effective they are in mitigating some of the effects of caffeine. But in my view, it seems like an indirect approach where you're taking in the caffeine, it's affecting your adenosine receptors and manipulating the release of your neurotransmitters. And then you're trying to kind of undo that damage with the adaptogens, where you could just opt for low caffeine alternatives. And then you can add some adaptogens to that, like holy basil or ashwagandha. These are great options to help calm the body and the mind, but you don't have to take in that full amount of caffeine. Now, I know coffee culture is really huge, and especially in the US, drinking coffee can be associated with productivity and with drive. And I would say for those social and ritualistic aspects of what drinking coffee might have brought you, try those lower caffeine alternatives. And then for the productivity piece, when we address some of the other physical issues that we'll be talking about in the rest of this video, you'll have more sustainable energy, and then you won't need to rely on caffeine to kind of jolt you into being more productive, but then ending up burning yourself out. Now, the second thing you want to look at is the link between your mood and your consumption of common inflammatory foods. How anxious or irritable do you feel after you've eaten something like gluten or pasteurized dairy? I know that every time I would eat gluten, I would experience much more anxious thoughts and experience a lot more self-doubt. You may have heard about the gut-brain connection. When you experience intestinal distress, which can happen not for everyone, but for a lot of people when they consume gluten, this can cause intestinal permeability where the gut lining begins to fragment and bacteria that's in the gut lining starts to leak into the bloodstream. This is called endotoxemia. And this can contribute to lots of mental health conditions, depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, so many of these. Now, really be honest with yourself with this, because it doesn't mean that you have to give up bread if you love it. You just want to find alternatives again, just like we were talking about with the coffee. So with the bread, sourdough bread is something that a lot of people who may not tolerate gluten as well can actually tolerate sourdough, because if it's fermented for 24 hours, then a lot of the gluten is taken out and it's a lot easier for the body to digest. If it's fermented for 12 hours, there's still going to be a lot of gluten in that, so you may want to be wary of that, but 24 hours or more can be really helpful and go a long way to ensuring that you're not getting an inflammatory response from something like this. There's a pizza shop that just opened in my neighborhood, and they actually use sourdough crust. And I love a good Neapolitan pizza every now and then. So I went and tried that, and it was totally fine for me. I digested that just as well as the stuff that I cook at home. And number 3 is you want to be looking at your baseline blood sugar levels, not the blood sugar levels that are momentarily elevated after eating a meal, but the baseline, because chronically elevated blood sugar can contribute to anxiety, to mood swings, to irritability. You want to guide your body to start using fat for fuel. Not that you're never going to eat carbs again. We just want to change up the distribution a little bit. I'm not necessarily recommending that everyone go on a low carb diet. We just want to increase our fat and protein relative to our carbs. Because if your body is always using carbs for quick fuel, then it's going to be experiencing a lot of oxidative stress. That stress is going to hype the body up and make you feel anxious. And you're going to be a lot more vulnerable to blood sugar crashes, meaning that comparatively it's coming down a lot from the high level that it's been at. And that means that you're feeling hangry, you're feeling anxious, and all of these things. And number 4 is that if you've done everything that we've talked about and you're still feeling anxious, then you may want to look at the environmental toxins that you're exposed to. Mold, for example, is a very potent neurotoxin, and mold toxicity has been linked to anxiety. So you want to take a good look and see what you're being exposed to, maybe do some testing. And then the first step would be obviously to change your environment so that you're reducing or eliminating that environmental stressor. But then you also want to be leaning into supporting detox pathways. You want to be sweating regularly. You could just turn the AC off and do a cardio workout at home, for example, or you could go to a sauna and sweat for 20 minutes or 45 minutes if it's an infrared sauna. You could also lean into some supports like zeolite. This is one that's one of my favorites. It works fantastically for me whenever I'm exposed to like harsh chemicals. If there's chemical cleaners around me, I'll start coughing, having a runny nose, and I'll take zeolite and I'll be good as new in like 15 minutes. You could also lean into some binders like activated charcoal, chlorella, bentonite clay. All of these are going to help round up and then eliminate the toxins from your body. But I would start low and slow with these. Just be careful. Take a moderate amount of these. And I have a whole video that goes into specific ways to detox. That's linked here, and it'll also be included in the description box. Now, the last, but arguably the most important physical health factor that is likely contributing to your anxiety is your vagal tone. And the vagus nerve runs from the brain all the way down through to the visceral organs, meaning the digestive and assimilation organs. And your vagus nerve is responsible for modulating your stress response. So when you have good vagal tone, that means that when you're going through a stressful experience where you're in this more activated nervous system fight or flight state, it doesn't feel as intense or heightened, and you don't feel so depleted after that stressful event has occurred. Now, the best measurement that we have right now to measure vagal tone is heart rate variability, HRV. Now, there's a lot of debate about whether or not this is the best measure, but it really is the only thing that we have right now. So smartwatches and Oura rings can measure HRV. There are also some apps that you can find on your smartphone that may or may not be totally accurate, but they could be a decent measure of HRV. But even if you don't measure this, everyone can benefit from strengthening their vagus nerve. There's no side effects to doing this. So one great practice is box breathing. Inhaling for 4 counts, holding the breath at the top of the inhale for 4, exhaling for 4 counts, and holding the breath at the bottom of the exhale for 4. Other great practices are singing and chanting. These are very effective ways to strengthen the vagus nerve. And then, of course, meditation. But this doesn't have to be a formal meditation practice where you're sitting and you're closing your eyes for 30 minutes. You could simply go out in nature and just be very mindful of your surroundings, noticing every leaf on the tree, noticing every blade of grass, and just doing that for a few minutes. And I actually have a full video on how to effectively calm your nervous system, even if you don't have an established meditation practice that's linked here. So there you have it. These are the 5 top physical factors that you want to be addressing if you want to heal your anxiety. And if you want to have a comprehensive plan for how to really up-level your baseline of health and vitality, I have a masterclass that walks you step by step on how to address 3 key pillars to optimal health. It's called the Masterclass for Superhuman Level Health, and I'll link that in the description box. Anxiety is simply your body calling for more support. And when you address these 5 physical factors that we discussed in this video, you'll go a long way to releasing your anxiety to the point where you may not even recognize your old anxious self. I know for me, when I think back to that time in my life several years ago when I felt crippled with anxiety, I can't even think about what was causing me to feel that way. It feels like a different person and it feels like a lifetime ago. If you found this video valuable, please give it a like and share it with someone else who might resonate and benefit from this information. And if you want to learn about more ways to become truly radiant in your body and your mind, then feel free to subscribe to this channel. Lots of love, and I'll talk to you soon.